Hello, welcome back to my channel. I wanted to shoot a little video today about the books that I read that helped me to write my book. So we're gonna just jump in, I guess. There's a mix of books here. It's like, I would say mostly poetry, but for sure, because it's a poetry book, I wrote a poetry book. But there's also novels, there's memoirs, stuff of that nature as well. So let's get started. First book is probably not going to surprise anybody, but it's Jeanette Winterson, Oranges Aren't the Only Fruit. Get you a shot of that cover, beautiful cover. This book is about, it's kind of based loosely off of the author's life, so it's like a fictionalized version of her real life. And it follows a character named Jeanette, who is like a young girl, probably like follows her from preteen to like teenage years. Like late teen years, and she grows up in a house. She's adopted, and she grows up in a house that is very religious. I think evangelical, yes, in England. And you know, she has like a very a mother with a very strong personality, I'll say, and a father that's kind of like very passive. And her mom's the one that's very evangelical in nature, just like very steeped in the religion, you know, goes to church almost every day, has church members over to the house for like prayer and service and things like that. So Jeanette is like growing up in this house, and she is abused and really made to feel less than because of her biological mother, mostly, and who her biological mother was, according to her adopted mother. And Jeanette eventually realizes that she is queer, gay, and falls in love with another girl from the church, and things sort of ensue from there. It's one of my favorite novels. I think probably my favorite. Like, I have written so many little notes inside and like underlined so many things. And I try and reread it every year, but sometimes it's like every couple years. There's so many scenes in this that like have stuck out in my mind. There's a passage in the beginning where Jeanette's mother is talking to her about two women that own a sweet shop in the neighborhood, and her mother says that these women suffer from unnatural passions, and Jeanette is like, I thought that meant they put like chemicals in their sweets, and I thought that was so funny. And then there's the scene, one of the penultimate scenes, that is like Jeanette facing off with like a pastor from her church, who is telling her that like she's going to hell because of her sexuality. She's a bad person because of her sexuality. And you know, Jeanette's arguing that like she can love God and love the girl that she's in love with. And this pastor is like, that girl never loved you, and you don't love God. And it like, something in me, like, I was reading this on the bus for the first time, and I like burst into tears reading that, just because it's not like one-to-one a map of my experience being queer and like growing up in a church, but it is kind of similar. So I was very emotional reading that. So I felt that this book was really talks about adoption in a way that gets to the heart of it, and speaks very truthfully and plainly about it. And I had never read anything like it before, so I love this book. It's first on the list. To follow that is another Jeanette Winterson book, Why Be Happy When You Can Be Normal. This is her memoir, so it's specifically about her life and not like fictionalized at all. And then she talks about some of the things that like she talks about in Oranges, so like growing up in the church, and her mom, her adoptive mother, and she also talks a little bit more about her her meeting her biological mother, and you know, how the abuse that she suffered as a child really affected her relationships with women as she grew up, and sort of started having relationships with women in queer relationships, and things like that. She talks about her writing career as well. She has, if you know about her work, you know that she has like a very storied and like accomplished writing career. So yeah, I love reading this because it was very, if there are gaps in oranges, then this book kind of fills the gaps. So yes, love this book as well. Next book is a poetry collection, Ghost of, by this author, Diana Coy Nguyen. This is one of my favorite books ever. It's stunning, it's devastating, it's gorgeous. It is about the author, I think her younger brother, I'll put a trigger warning on this, but like her younger brother commits suicide. And before he does, he goes through the house and cuts himself out of all the pictures in the home. And she's writing about that experience and that act throughout these poems. And also, like, I'll show you. Here's a great example. Some of the poems are like, have like a person-sized hole cut out of them to like signify or like represent her brother cutting himself out of the family photos. And some of them are like in the shape of a person. So here's an example. Here you can see this one is a person-sized, like person-shaped poem, and then this one has the person-sized hole cut out. Yeah, just some of the most like devastating but precise and exact and just miraculous writing I've ever read in my life is in this book. And I love it. I just like, it's not a loss that I've suffered. I've never had a family member of mine die in that way. But it still like grabs your heart and like chokes it, you know? And in my book, I talk about like loss in a different way, but reading this was very instrumental in me being able to talk about loss in the way that I do in my book. Okay, so next is, I'm like, this is also a favorite, you know, like all these books are favorites, and this one is very worn. I've had it for a long time. This is Lighthead by Terrence Hayes. There are these poems in here, which, hold on, let me show you this. I saw him read in July of 2015, and he drew little pictures of me in the books that I had him sign. You can see that's me down there in my little fro. I just love that. I was going through a really horrible time during that time of my life, and that little picture just makes me smile every time I see it. But yes, there's these poems in here about like parenthood and being a son. 3 measures of time is what they're called, and how it's split into 3 sections. And How My Mother Tells Time is like one of my favorite, one of the most impactful little nuggets of a poem that I've ever read. Yeah, I would read it to you, but I would probably like cry. But so many great poems in this book. Like I said, about like parenthood, motherhood, fatherhood, blackness and race in the U.S., and like lineage and things like that. And it's just like so good. I was in college when I first read this book, and my advisor at the time was like, you should read this book. And I was kind of like, I don't know, I'm trying to read like mostly Black lesbian authors right now. But I saw this cover and I was like, that's beautiful, I'll pick up that book. And now I'm like a Terrence Hayes head. Love him so much. His work is like incredible. Okay, next we have, this book is in great shape. I think because the cover is a little bit harder. But this is Calling a Wolf by Kaveh Akbar. You can see I have a lot of poems sectioned off in there. This book is about the author and the speaker's like experience with addiction, alcoholism in particular, and it mostly deals with like the like really rough and tough parts of being an addict, which I talk about in my book a little bit. I also talk about sobriety and recovery, but this book is more like addiction focused, and it's just like, it's so smart, so brilliant. When I first read it, I was kind of like, on some of the poems, but like as I have read it and like gotten older and gotten more settled in my sobriety, it all just like really rings true and like hits you in the chest in a way that I adore. And there are these poems in here, Portrait of the Alcoholic, blah, dot, 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 you know, and that's where I got the Hustle for the Alcoholic poems in my book. So yes, Kaveh is a friend and a really brilliant poet, so I'm happy to have that book to have read where now is going through my journey. This is a heavy hitter. This is What to Eat, What to Drink, and What to Leave for Poison by Camille T. Dungy. And these poems are like, mostly deal with like being a mother, having children, family, things like that. And also like womanhood, being a woman in general, but then like there are poems that sort of chronicle the lives of famous women, so like Ella Fitzgerald or like who else? Billie Holiday. Just like some of the best writing you could ever imagine in this book. I love Camille's work because she talks about nature in a way that is so like crisp and tight and like also really expansive. Like there's this thing that she does sometimes where she'll just like list a bunch of different plants one after the other in a way that like feels excessive but like in a totally welcome way. Yeah, the last poem in the book is the titular poem, and it's split up into sections, I think like 10 sections. It's actually what is it called, a crown of sonnets? Yes. And just like I think about this poem so often, think about this book so often, and I'm really happy that I read it. And I reread it often. By Toy Derek Hot. Toy is like one of my favorite people in the world. This is like her new and selected. It came out in like 2019, so new in that era. Toy's like my mentor, and sometimes I like will have a poem that I'm writing and trying to figure it out and trying to make it good, and I'm like, God, I gotta get Toy's opinion. I need her to like set me straight, you know. And yeah, these poems are like about pretty much everything that you can imagine, because it really follows her career to the T. And I really like the poems that are about her family, and the poems from like, let's say, what is the poems from Natural Birth, or The Empress of the Death House, or Tender is a great poem. You should read that one. The Undertaker's Daughter is also a great work of poetry. That book has the Telly the Fish poems in there, if you know those. And yeah, I just love Toy. I love her. I forgot she put this in there. Her little drawing of Telly the Fish. Oh. Yeah, just a great book. And then we're down to the last two. So Averno, Louise Gluck. This is really about like what do I want to say? Ancient Roman history and myth. So like she talks about Persephone in here. Persephone the Wanderer is one of the poems in the book that I love. And just like this act or like identity of being a daughter is really important in these works. And the relationship, the mother-daughter relationship, is also very important. And it's just like, Louise is a legend, R.I.P. She is like one of my favorite poets. If people ask me who my favorite poet is, I say her. Just because I always come back to her work and like I'm stunned and I'm silenced and moved beyond words every time I read her work. So I read this one probably a few months into like writing the book, and then a few months after it came out. So not after it came out, but like a few months before it came out. And then the last book I'm going to talk about is Obit by Victoria Chang. These poems are about death, and they're written in like little obituary, mostly in little obituary form. So like, let me show you, like that. And it mostly deals with her father's death, but also she'll write like here, this poem that I'm looking at right now, it says, friendships died a slow death after August 3rd, 2015. And she'll do that throughout the book, and just write about these little deaths that happen around the bigger death of like a family member. Yeah, just like brilliant stuff. So it's such a really inventive form that she takes on in this book, and the things that she names as like things that are dying as along with her father, or like language or memory or tears and stuff like that. Just like really quotidian but impactful things. So yeah, love this book, loved reading it, and thinking about it while I was writing my own book. This video is getting long, so I'm probably gonna end it here, but thank you for watching. I'll be back soonish. I want to do another video about Submittable because I'm back in there. I'm back in the trenches, submitting workout for my next book, and I just want to cover that a little bit and show you like what my Submittable looks like, what my acceptances look like, and what my rejections look like, so you can see like it's okay to have a lot of rejections. I often really aim to have a lot of rejections. So yeah, I'll be doing that probably in the next video. So thank you for watching. Bye.